And we got a great show for you today. Joining us right now is Michael Gordon. Michael Gordon was a spokesperson for the Clinton Justice Department. He's a principal at the Gordon Group, and he's also a columnist for Business Insider. Mike, thanks for joining us today on Liquid Lunch. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
I want to get your insights as someone who worked closely with the Democrats. You were a spokesperson for the Clintons in the Justice Department. This whole impeachment thing. I mean, you work, for the Justice Department, and just the whole thing is just so confusing to me. Understanding the political landscape, why are they spending so much resources, time, and money of the American taxpayer when they know that the Republicans control the Senate? Why is it, do you think?
Sure. So I agree that the acquittal is a foregone conclusion. Pelosi was very reluctant to march toward impeachment. You remember during the whole Mueller discussion, she didn't want to go to impeachment. She said it would be the last thing on her list. There were a lot of reasons she didn't want to go for it. But when the Ukraine scandal happened, that's when she felt like she had no choice, and her caucus basically even pushed her into it. She didn't lead it. Her caucus pushed her into it. And so it was really what happened in Ukraine that began this whole thing. But I agree, it's not necessarily a political winner for the Democrats. You can see that in the numbers, but they're not doing it because it's a political winner. They're doing it because they felt like they had no choice.
Well, somewhere in there, Nancy Pelosi said it's going to be clear, it's got to be compelling, and it's got to be bipartisan. So there was nothing about what happened in the House that was bipartisan. In fact, if you want to go empirically by the numbers, you had one Democrat who voted with the Republicans. So if that's a standard, it wasn't bipartisan by any stretch because no one voted with the Democrats from the Republican side. So why keep pushing it when it's not politically palatable for them? Just, is it a principle thing? Like they want to somehow taint the president? They want to create this dialogue that he's done this terrible thing to our country? I think if no one said anything, it would have just went away. They got the money, ultimately.
Right. Well, it wasn't about getting the money, or it wasn't about the investigation. It was about the threat. So if you attempt murder, but it doesn't go through, it's still a crime. And so if you withhold the aid, then it's still an impeachable offense. And that's basically what happened. So I agree that it would be better for the country if this were a more bipartisan situation, but that's not the reality of our politics these days. And so much of any import gets done with both sides of the aisle making it happen.
Got it. Thanks for that. So I want to shift gears over to the New York Times. The strangest thing I've ever seen, the Gray Lady comes out, and in I would say, one of the most important presidential elections in the history of our country. We have a president under impeachment. We're in the final throes of the last year of his first term with a presidential election coming up. And the New York Times can't even come up with a decisive play on choosing a candidate. How strange is it to you to see them endorse not one but two candidates?
Right. Well, first of all, I just want to say the Times endorsement has zero impact on any voter in Iowa, any voter in New Hampshire, any voter in South Carolina, any voter in Nevada. It has zero impact. It's more for the media and punditocracy to talk about. Having said that, we're talking about it today, and I think it would have had more power, certainly if they had endorsed one candidate. My own armchair analysis is that they wanted to endorse Klobuchar, but she's seen as a moderate, and they didn't want to piss off the liberal side of their readership. I would say, by and large, the endorsement was more positive toward Klobuchar than it was toward Warren. There were both positives and negatives of both. But my thinking is they wanted to split the apple a little bit. And there truly is a debate about the Democratic Party, and it's playing out in this nominations process because it is between sort of the moderates and the liberals, and we'll see who emerges. I'll just make one other quick point, which is, I grew up in the Midwest. My family is full of swing voters, and I think there's actually more made than necessary on liberal versus moderate versus conservative, but that's another discussion.
Michael, you talk about how the New York Times endorsement doesn't affect any voter in Iowa, and I certainly agree. And then you talk about how ineffectual this endorsement is for any voter because they endorse two candidates. Do we still, in this era, even need newspapers to be making endorsements? How about you just cover what the candidates say and let the voters make up their own mind about who they want to endorse? Why do we still need newspaper endorsements?
Right. So I think New York Times is about influencing the larger discussion, influencing the political class, if you will. But I do think endorsements matter to a small degree when the Des Moines Register makes an endorsement or the Manchester Union Leader makes an endorsement. So I think the local papers do have a small effect. But I think in general, political endorsements don't matter whether they're from newspapers or other politicians.
Now, I want to see if you can give us a little in-depth insight here. Hillary Clinton continues to keep popping her head up here and there. There was a series, a 4-part series documentary where Hillary, it just came out, was quoted talking about Bernie being incredibly unlikable. And then she went on to, basically refused to say she would endorse him if he was the candidate. She says nobody likes him, basically. What's the strategy here? What do you know? You work for the Clintons.
Right. So clearly there's still a lot of bad blood between the Clintons and Sanders, and that has come out in the documentary. It's come out in her subsequent interview. I think the more interesting thing is, will this have an impact on the voters in Iowa and New Hampshire? Because clearly that's the effect that they're going for with the timing of the documentary, the timing of the interview. And it's right on the heels, keep in mind, of the disagreement he had with Elizabeth Warren that came out just last week. And he certainly, this plays to the issues that a lot of Democrats have, that Sanders is not sufficiently pro-women in terms of how he's managed his campaign. And whatever he said to Elizabeth Warren, I don't think nothing was said. I think something was said. Who knows what it was. And then his issues with Hillary Clinton. He may have a problem with female voters going into the primary and caucuses. So that'll be interesting to watch. And certainly Hillary Clinton would be very happy to put the final stake in his heart.
All right, Michael Gordon, I want to thank you so much for joining us for a Liquid Lunch. I want to thank you for tuning in today, but don't go anywhere. Stay right there. More Liquid Lunch is coming at you. Republican Senate candidate from New Jersey, Hirsch Singh, is here with a message today for Senator Cory Booker